everybody. Welcome. It's really amazing. I mean, this is Austin. 280 people here to watch a 4.5-hour Romanian movie about a funeral. It's incredible. Like, where else is that going to happen? It's just not going to happen anywhere. Oh, no, that's the other theater. I'm sorry. You guys are here for They Live, right? The John Carpenter. Okay, right. I'm sorry. Times Without Sunlight is great. I recommend seeing it. So, thank you guys for coming. This is a really great series. It's a series that's it's a journey through the 80s with Richard Linklater, founder of Austin Film Society, artistic director of Austin Film Society, a great filmmaker, as you all know. And he's chosen a lot of movies from all over the map. Great auteurs, films, international films, but films that all in this series have one thing in common. They're from between 1987 and 1989. And this has been a voyage over several years going through the 80s and re-examining films, and especially films that Rick saw during the 1980s, and going back and taking a look at some of them. This is a movie that I remember so well when it came out. It wasn't like it was a cheap movie. It wasn't that big a deal. And it was like, it didn't have a big ad campaign behind it, and then people just gravitated to it. There was just something about it that we all sort of responded to. It really had a message. And that has just continued through the years. So I'm so glad that Rick chose this one to present. And I'd like to bring to the stage right now AFS founder, artistic director, Richard Linklater. Thanks, Lars. Thank you. Yeah, so excited to be here. How many of you are visiting Jules in the Wasteland for the first time? So cool. All right. John Carpenter brings them out. So in short, this series, like Laura says, it's multi-year. I started in 1980, and I'm just kind of working through the 80s. And it's very subjective. I talk about, personally, I just wanted to see these films again. I was kind of thinking, the 70s gets all the credit for the great decade of cinema. But I was like, hey, I started getting into films in the 80s. It wasn't so bad. A lot of great films in the 80s, a lot of gems, jewels, if you will. That's what this is. I haven't seen this film since it came out. This isn't academic. I didn't watch a DVD last night. I'm not telling you what to think. It's Lars and I will get up here after and have a discussion with you guys. We can all talk about it. But I often just talk about where I was, when I saw it. And, I remember just wandering into a mall theater in Galveston, Texas. Probably the weekend this came out. I'd seen billboards, and I like John Carpenter. He's a badass, okay? Carpenter, if there was ever a guy who's just born to make movies, if you've seen his early films, especially, have you, Dark Star. Have you all, everybody seen Dark Star? It's just brilliant. It's a student film that they added more footage and made a low-budget feature, but it's great. Go check out Dark Star. It's kind of it's just, they go around, it's so funny because the metaphysical implications of 2001, this is in the early 70s. He's just the opposite. These guys go around blowing up planets. They don't give a shit. Someone talks like that, he goes, I just want something to blow up, So Carpenter is the best combination of like horror, action, and comedy. He's consistently funny and just has a great spirit. Obviously, he followed that up, Assault on Precinct 13, and then Halloween, all before he's even 30, So, and often talk about the 80s being, it was a tough decade for a lot of auteurs, a lot of people to get films made, but Carpenter had a pretty damn good 80s. You look at it, last week I read a long list of Woody Allen's films in the 80s because we were showing Another Woman, but Carpenter has an equal, pretty badass list. I wrote down a few, I have a quote from him I'm going to read here in a second. But yeah, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, Christine, Starman, Big Trouble in Little China, Prince of Darkness, and They Live. That's a pretty damn good decade, Mr. Carpenter. And so I just remember wandering into this mall cinema, and the 80s, the bedrock of this whole series is the 80s just really sucked, Reagan, and it was just bad, Yuppies were taking over the world, and it was just ugly times, And and to see this, what I perceived as a studio film, I'm watching it in a mall, advertising and everything, and it's such a wonderfully subversive, like crazy message. It made you feel like, it's the kind of attitude you had in punk and indie, but you wouldn't see it in a mall. So it felt subversive just to be in a mall watching this movie that weekend. Kind of like when I watched Blue Velvet in a mall that weekend. It's kind of like, okay, there's something to live for. There's life. People are thinking. So it's just, you know, the film, I don't even remember that much of the actual plot. I mean, this guy, Roddy Piper, the famous wrestler, Roddy, he plays this guy, John Nada, is his name? Nada, truly nobody. Unemployed construction worker, I think. He kind of wanders in, he's into town, just a portrait of grinding poverty. And, you know, the world is really ugly. And, you know, of course, there's this splashy wealth everywhere, too. But he kind of wanders into this situation where he, you know, you put on these shades. Am I giving away much? You've all seen the thing, you know. But he sees that there's a hidden world. It's like a great sci-fi paranoia thing, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's this hidden world that these ghoulish elites, aliens actually are running it, you know, just brainwashing us all, you know, for conformity, obey, conform, breed, just accept the status quo. So he becomes part of this resistance to break this down. So and that's the setup. There's some wonderful, there's this one kind of crazy fight sequence that I think he gets his money's worth out of Mr. Piper. It goes on forever. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's kind of brilliant, subversive too, because he and Keith David, who they're friends, they're comrades in the battle, but they're fighting over, I forget what, but they had this long fight, and it's like, we're eating ourselves. Why don't we gang up? You know, so I think he's saying something there, but it is kind of, it's a lengthy fight. Anyway. And here, let me read you this quote. I found a quote from Mr. Carpenter. They Live was giving the finger to Reagan when no one else would. You know, Reagan was still in office when this came out. And by the end of the 70s, there was a backlash against everything in the 60s, and that's what the 80s were. And Ronald Reagan became president, Reaganomics came in. So a lot of the ideals that I grew up with were under assault. And something called a yuppie came into existence. And they just wanted money. And so by the late 80s, I'd had enough. And I decided I had to make a statement. And as stupid and banal as it is, but I made one. And that's They Live. So I have to disagree with him. It's not stupid and banal. It's eccentric, it's subversive, it's clever, it's action-packed, and it's fun. So Carpenter delivers the goods, man. So Lars and I will be up here to talk about it after. I'm anxious to see it, see how this thing holds up. I think if they would make it today, it's probably, I sense it's probably still very relevant. Things haven't gotten better. Instead of this elite, we just call them probably the 1%. I don't know. So, okay, see you after. You got that. All right. Man. Well, thanks, Lars. That was a, how about that 35 millimeter print we just saw? Beautiful. Beautiful job. This is what it, 30 years ago, this is exactly what it felt like. Nowhere else in the world is anyone watching this movie tonight. Beautiful widescreen.
Yeah, we got the print, and actually we're going to show it a couple more times. So, you know, let your friends know, because your friends tomorrow are going to be like, "You did what? I didn't tell you." So the print's going to hang around for a little while. There's a few more screenings. So
that was so damn fun. God.
Yeah, we were just talking like we're just like he's such a good classical filmmaker. Like,
yeah, he's just so he's just a great filmmaker. He does it all. You know, he wrote the script under he didn't use his name, but he wrote the script. He does the music. He did, you know, just all in, man. So talented. You know, I was watching it. I got a little sad because I was thinking, you know, just recently we've lost Wes Craven, George Romero, and our own Tobe Hooper. You know, our own patron saint around here, and is he the last one of that kind of I don't know. It's just sad. We're losing
of the Americans, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Carpenter, it's amazing. Watching it,
I was reminded, like, you know, in the 80s, the sunglasses, you know, starting with, I don't know if it started, but risky business, you know, the shades meant like yuppie. I like that they're kind of reclaiming it.
Tapping them down.
Yeah, every movie poster or ad always had someone with shades going, you know, after Risky Business was a hit. You know, there was an Austin band, Timbuk3, I don't know if you remember, they had a big hit, one of a big breakout hit called The Future's So Bright, I Have to Wear Shades, which was making fun of, you know, this kind of yuppie, oh God, that, you know, polo shirt, getting into Harvard, whatever that shit is. It was just terrible. Shades, materialism.
When you went to
so
when you went to a mall, you practically got tackled by somebody trying to get you to put on the shades. Like you'd walk around and they try to get you to buy like the freaking Ray-Bans at the mall. It was terrible. Just the sunglasses component of the 80s were terrible.
Right. I've refused to wear shades ever since.
Stay strong.
Yeah.
But what were your sort of some of your new thoughts having seen this for the first time?
You know, we were
in years.
You know, we were talking about it before. You know, when I saw it, I thought this was a big Hollywood film. But you know, we were talking before, and knowing Carpenter's career a little more now, he was on the outs, right? This was pretty low budget indie thing, even though it got distributed a little more wide.
The way the arc went, it was like he made from Halloween on. He was just
on a roll there,
more and more golden.
Yeah,
and then he made Big Trouble in Little China, which, despite the fact that we all love that film, was a big bomb, and he couldn't get a budget anymore.
Like a lot of great '80s movies, just underappreciated, dumped by the studio, misunderstood.
And so he made Prince of Darkness and this. Prince of Darkness is also really good, I think. And this on no budget, and just all ingenuity.
You know, his indie spirit kicks in, takes a low budget. He can't afford Kurt Russell, I guess. He gets Roddy Piper. You know, I forgot to mention in the intro, one of his early films too, I remember watching it, is, you know, he did a great made-for-TV movie a couple years after Elvis died. He did Elvis with Kurt Russell. That was the first time he worked with him. That's a good movie too. Very different for him, but then he and Kurt Russell had that great run. But yeah, this is it's admirable that you can just feel his, you know, I don't know if it's just anger or just, like he said in that quote I read before, you could tell he just had something to say. It was just a big fuck you. And he says it with such oomph, you know. I forgot all the body count, you know, the violence. That was so good. Lots of guns, lots of blood. A lot of those things to kill, man. You got a lot of them to.
Despite the fact that he had to hire a leading man who was an economy leading man, you know, Roddy Piper's pretty good.
I think he's good. Yeah. Other people bag on him, oh, not much of an actor. He's totally effective. I think he works, and they look great together. You know, Keith David. That's wrestling. You know, it's the wrestling. You got to have the shirt off. Got to be buff. You know, them's the rules, right? So.
I wonder if we have any. I can tell this audience is bursting with contributions here. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask?
This isn't necessarily a Q&A. Like, we don't have all the answers. Make a statement.
Yeah, we
you know,
talk
we don't have to.
Yeah, right over
we
here.
don't know everything. I don't.
Just have a plot question, actually, just really quick. How come nobody realized at the banquet that Nada had killed a lot of people? Like, they knew who he was. Everybody at the construction site, like, it was on the TV that he had killed a bunch of people.
Yeah, Rick.
Yeah. I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. They had their backs to him, though. Remember, they come in the back. So.
They got recruited.
It's a low-budget movie. Well, when he was on the TV, it was an earlier picture, too. He didn't have the...
Yeah, you could tell it's him.
Look different.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. Cool black eyes. You don't notice them.
All right, I see a hand in the back right here, yeah.
So did the bubblegum line influence the beer line in Days of Confused?
Ah, I knew you were going to say that. Of course. It wouldn't be in there if it wasn't here. Yeah, of course.
And what was that line?
Oh, Nicky Cat, when he's kind of starting a fight with Adam Goldberg, says, "I only came here to do two things: kick ass and drink beer. Looks like we're already out of beer. Looks like we're out of beer." You know that. Instead of bubble gum.
I have to check that movie out sometime.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Who else has a question or contribution, a comment, anything? All right, well, we'll wrap it up. No, right over here.
Meatloaf is like
Under a pseudonym? No.
Yeah.
Which character?
The
guy,
Am I right?
with the canvas
The Southern Draw guy.
jacket that got shot.
That's Meatloaf?
Yeah. I swear.
Okay, quick vote. Is that Meatloaf? Is Meatloaf in this movie? Raise your hand. Okay, he's not in the movie. There's no credits. What are you saying? What? That's not his name, is it?
No.
We would know that, wouldn't we?
All right, let's just kind of, we'll table this.
Any other
We'll
research?
put the research team on that right back
from
here.
left field?
Rowdy.
Big Ghostbusters fan. I see that they reuse props from Ghostbusters. They use the PKE beaters as the communicators at the end. That tickled me.
Was it? You think it's the actual prop?
That looks like the same exact prop.
The PKA.
You think they just went to the same prop house and?
Is Ghostbusters Universal?
Uh,
We're asking too many questions here. Does anybody have like a phone?
Yeah, aren't you supposed to like find this really quickly?
Okay, we'll move on from that. But okay, yeah, this is gonna be.
Here's how we
insane.
do this: we all go home and look it up, and come back next week and tell us. I looked that up. If you can't find it now,
Right over here.
know
Yeah.
someone who's the prop master on Ghost. They said yeah. There's a lot more.
It's confirmed.
Humanity has been awakened. How would you like to see that movie go?
The sequel. What year would the sequel be? Like today? Or all these? We're awakened.
But would he be like a pain in the ass, like Alex Jones guy or something?
Well, the film is ultimately. How do you think? Is it pessimistic for who's winning?
He had the Mexico wall that shrunk.
Right. He's saying a lot right there, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's so, the working poor fighting each other, black, white, racial, fighting each other instead of the powers that be, brainwashed, greedy. It's pretty. The critique is there. I don't know what the challenge is to us. Obviously, at the end, our hero dies.
Would he be a Trump
Both
voter?
of them. Who? Right?
Yeah. Would he be a Trump
No.
voter?
No.
Because he has like all the hallmarks, like working class, feeling ripped off by society, like all the people who bought into like.
He
the
would have been
train.
Trump voter pre-glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. That would
But
have
once you're put the glasses on,
Bernie all the way.
never again. Yeah.
So in the meantime, I think we did hear that maybe it is actually
That would be
Meatloaf.
it.
Somebody said maybe. That's what I'm hearing. Let me sleep on it. Baby. Right over here.
Curious what kind of distribution did Suburbia and Repo Man get in comparison to this, and Brazil for that matter, because it seems like there's a consistent kind of punk rock undercurrent of mainstream cinema.
Well, Brazil was it was kind of dumped for a long time, but Universal did distribute that.
That was George Harrison's handmade films, right? Brazil.
Was it?
I think so.
That was the one they
Yeah.
put on the shelf. Terry Gilliam
Yeah.
had to run an ad in Variety.
Yeah.
Mr. Scheinberg, released my film, but they did, and it kind of got its cult status.
So, but didn't all three of those films
Well-
get somewhat good distribution?
Not really. I think you talking about Penelope Spheris Suburb. That was a total indie, like a couple $100,000 indie that did play around indie circuit.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other one?
Repo Man.
And Repo Man was like a big indie hit. I think it had one of those official distributors. We all saw that. And was that 85, 80, 84, mid-80s?
84.
Yeah.
But this was Universal released it. They just didn't put
Yeah.
a lot of money into the campaign. They just saw it as sort of second tier.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking a little bit earlier. It was like there were certain movies where the commercial would come on Monday Night Football. The commercial would come on primetime TV, and then
Right.
there were movies that the commercials would just be local ad buys, and it would be on like the rerun of Gilligan's Island.
Right.
And this was kind of a Gilligan's Island.
Yeah. Well, that was Roger Corman, Sam Arkoff's kind of method. They would go into a community, pump up TV ads. Yeah, not on prime time, but they would just let everyone know this film was all those Roger Corman films growing up. Death Race 2000. It was all over the TV for 2 weeks. You just couldn't wait to see it. And you didn't realize it wasn't like a huge, movie, but it was in your theater. So the economics of that worked. That all was kind of going away by by this time, there weren't TV ads for indie films. You had to be pretty. It didn't seem like it. So this felt like a studio film, but yeah, it's second tier. It wasn't everywhere. Was this a hit? Did it do
Yeah.
well? I don't even remember. It felt
I don't think it did well, but it didn't cost much.
Yeah,
I
so
think
it's
that's
kind of
a deal.
neutral. I guess Carpenter was kind of having that divorce from Hollywood, and I think he had such an attitude. He never really went back so much. Did
After
he?
this, it was that memoir of an Invisible Man with Chevy Chase that
Yeah.
another director got fired off of, and that he got put on. And then that was the only movie he did for 4 years, so he was
Yeah.
really out of it.
Right now he's touring. He plays his music. He does all these scores and shows movies. He's pretty active. He's out and about.
Ahead of his time with his music too. Like everybody,
Yeah, it's a great score.
everybody loves his music.
Yeah, and that's why he's touring. He sells a lot of his music. He tours, albums.
Does he play the movies like?
I think he does. Yeah, I haven't. Someone told me they were going to one of these things. I haven't seen it, or I don't think he's brought that to Austin. Maybe we should get him here, huh?
I think he's more expensive than we can make back in this room.
Yeah.
Like every ticket would have to be like $150.
We've got our big room over there. Maybe
Yeah.
we could crowd a bunch of people in.
You gotta have a tattoo artist giving They Live tattoos. Take the money
Yeah.
and pay John Carpenter.
Something. We could get him here. We could do a GoFundMe or something.
Right over here.
So I read this book called Movie Made America by Robert Sklar, and it talks about, of course, how cinema went from being a phenomena of the human spirit in America, of course, and started by immigrant, lower working class communities to being controlled by the studios. I'm just curious, do you all have any other movies that you think? I haven't seen anything that tackle or confront class inequality the way this movie has in American cinema as of recent. Do you all have any maybe suggestions that I could watch? Or?
Let me repeat that because you were right up close.
Yeah.
So in Robert Sklar's Movie Made America, he talks about how films really went from being sort of the small D democratic medium to being really taken over by the studios, particularly as
Very
budgets
corporate,
increase. Yeah, studios, and being part of sort of speaking with the corporate voice. And then you're also asking, you say that this has sort of a populist feeling, and asking if there's anything more recently.
I haven't. I haven't seen anything recently of cinema that.
That feels like it has populist
maybe
undercurrents.
Can I make a pitch for next week's film that we're showing in this very theater? Mike Leigh's High Hopes. It's his first thing, and it's kind of a British. I won't say it's a social. Mike Leigh, a bit of a social satire. It's his first feature. Came out the same year as this, and I think there's a relation. It's not this genre, but it's kind of Thatcher's England, kind of Reagan's America. They're sort of cousins in this. They both were, gutting the welfare state and disregarding the population. Just bad times. What this movie shows. So his films are all about that. But again, very London-based. But that was a worldwide phenomenon. The '80s were really
what about it?
changing. But I don't know. The thesis there that Hollywood was this. It was always corporate. If you really study Louis B. Mayer, MGM, it was all about. They were just trying to make. Even though they were immigrants and working class people, they knew mainstream tastes, and that's what they were always going for. I think you always had to. But the thing is, they made so many damn movies, and the subversives and the messages, there was enough. So there they are, and those are the ones we still pay attention to. But by and large, Hollywood's always kind of cranked out, corporate dreck. That's been the thing. It just got worse in the '80s. This was, they really were, post Heaven's Gate, there was a couple big auteurist disasters, and they kicked out the artists, and really, it made it tough for everybody. And that's just gotten worse and worse. But they still made a lot of films. It's technically, vis-a-vis the studios, it's worse today than it was in the '80s, or it's a different industry altogether. But
Because there's so much more consolidation, and so like a bank
Yeah.
owns the studio, and they will very frankly make their priorities known.
Yeah, and they just make a lot. Studios actually do less films, much bigger films, but just less. But there's this huge indie. There's this big industry right below that so many thrive in.
I just wanted to tell a quick story. So I grew up in a really conservative I saw this movie when I was in high school, Friday night in my basement, and I never took the glasses off since. And I just wanted to thank John Carpenter.
You're who he made this for.
Yeah, exactly.
I promise you. I was older, you know, when I saw this, whatever, 27. You know, I was kind of like, oh, I wish I was a teenager watching. I mean, I loved it, but I was like, I really wish I was 17 watching this for the first time. But yeah, no, he would be very proud of that, I'm sure.
Right over here.
Have you guys seen the perverts thing ideology?
The Slavoj Zizek.
Slavoj thing.
Yeah.
You've seen his breakdown on this? It's pretty fantastic. So he's in the fight and he's kind of watching through the full fight of just the fight scene and breaking down the philosophical analysis of it. It's pretty hilarious.
Of just the fight, just the long
Oh,
fight.
my God.
He breaks down the whole film while being kind of interjected into the fight scene.
That sounds great. Can we see that?
So lunatic
Just throw it up?
philosopher Slavoj Zizek has broken down that fight scene, and presumably somebody's ripped it off and put it on YouTube by now, I imagine.
Yeah, he broke down a bunch of scenes from movies, and he does this philosophical breakdown of all of them. They're very good.
So what do you
The
YouTube?
Pervert's Guide to Ideology. It's on Netflix. It's a full film. But,
Yeah, yeah.
But within that, there's this. How many minutes is his section on They
It's
Live?
like a good 10 minutes. It's
10
like the
minutes?
fight scene. So
Yeah.
half of it.
Yeah, that's pretty long. That fight scene is pretty amazing. Those guys are doing those stunts. They're hitting the ground. I mean, those guys are, they're both pretty formidable. It's an impressive fight.
It's a metaphor for the like terrible rebirth of ideologies, being ripped away from his reigning ideology and adopting a radical new one, according to Zizek.
Yeah, I definitely saw that.
Yeah. Keith David's being ripped. Yeah, but it's too bad you have to be just pummeled into submission practically to get that, but that's what needs to happen.
A chilling vision of the future.
Yeah,
Right back
maybe
here.
that's the sequel.
So, first of all, John Carpenter did come to Austin about a year and a half ago with that show, the live music show.
Bass Concert Hall or something?
ACL Live.
ACL Live.
Oh, ACL Live.
They showed the scenes behind as he's playing.
How come? Who here saw that? I didn't even hit that. Okay, well, why didn't you say something? I didn't know. It's quiet. I'm out of it now. I don't know.
People think of the 80s as like synth pop and big hair and fashion or whatever, but this movie shows it as a lot darker. And not long afterwards, you shot Slacker. Not long after this movie came out, and Slacker, if you watch it now, is pretty darn dark.
Yeah,
People don't remember that.
I remember.
And,
I was there in the 80s. That was my own little.
yeah, so
She remembers too.
what were sort of your influences of the 80s on that movie that maybe people don't, remember that, what was influencing you at that time?
Oh gosh, everything. We had I think Sundance had like a 20-year screening of that. I went back there and watched it again, and I was like, God, I think I was just edgy, crazy, on the edge of, but it was fun and funny. But I just thought everything meant something, It was kind of, I don't know. It's hard to articulate, but just the air breathing in the mid to late 80s. That just was a kitchen sink movie of all that stuff. But this isn't about me. This is about.
But is there a place for anger and resentment and a chip on your shoulder when you're creating art?
Cinema was good for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially indie cinema, That's what people respond to it. You can't just take this money. You got to come in with a, have something to say it, fuck it. That's always fun.
It is so much more resonant than anybody would have ever expected when this movie came out. I mean, the fact that it really is popular, and you see T-shirts, and you've had the Shepard Fairey example.
Yeah, obviously those obeys with Andre the Giant. Yeah, it ripples through culture all the way. How can it not? Yeah.
So there's something about the theme that still resonates with us today, and because I think we haven't stopped being fooled and ripped off, and it's transparent to some of us, and it's clearly not to others.
Yeah, I think that's the battleground it's perpetual. It's always there. So it's good to have that in the back of your mind.
Take a few more contributions from the audience. I see a hand right over here.
Yeah, I actually had a question after a statement. So, our friends right here took us along to see this. First time we've ever seen it. The first time we're here, actually. super awesome. So thanks for putting it on.
Well, thanks. Are you Film Society members yet? You really should be.
We'll get
a
you
lot,
set up.
A lot of people really worked hard to make this theater thing work for Austin. So the Film Society membership really pays for itself. You know, these discounts, these free screenings, we have all kinds of great stuff.
You're
You're
welcome
losing
even
money,
if you're
but
just a bum. It's fine. It's
yeah,
okay.
you can just wander in. That's fine. But we show so many great movies.
And a quick question for you guys. After seeing this film, this is a great concept. Everything they're talking about here, you know, open up, look around. What's a film that you would both recommend, either one from each or together, that somebody like us should go and explore, that we might not?
Along these lines, yeah, like and similar to what your question is. Let's take a ball. Dolores playing right here now.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the true activist, portrait of an activist, how to change the world, one person. That's a documentary. We'll throw some out. Athena, what are we looking for here again? It's just
Consciousness raising movies.
about class. There's so many. You know, there's filmmakers who every film they do. Ken Loach, all the grits. What Americans.
That movie that we saw, it was you two, and it was the Greek movie, and at the end the girl and the boy jump off. Honestly, I didn't.
Shepherds of Disaster? You saw that at the Alamo? Isn't that great?
It was fantastic. That's a dream role. But I felt like that was.
That's a truly radical, political, incredible movie.
What was that name?
Shepherds of Disaster, which is a little hard to find.
It's a Greek
I will
movie.
say.
I haven't been able to find it since then.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was the movie for the. I didn't say it at the time, but I felt like that was the movie for the underdog. And it wasn't. I think it did have that purpose, and it felt like it was a big fuck you almost to the.
Yeah, well, film is so good at that. You know, I mean, just it's always in opposition. Like Buñuel's entire career. You know, I'm just thinking of directors who just that's their view of the world, and I'm thinking of Hollywood filmmakers who consistently show. I mean, that's what's so badass about this, because people joked about it, or they joke about yuppies, and they, you know, made these kind of vapid comedies about it. But this is in the '80s, in the Reagan era. It was bad. That's what makes this so bold at the time.
So I'm going to say that if you hadn't seen this before, then there's a pretty good chance you haven't seen Repo Man before. Is that true? Yeah, so Repo Man, you should absolutely go and see next.
Sid and
Yeah,
Nancy.
yeah.
We showed Sid and Nancy as part of this series.
But go watch Repo Man tonight, actually, because it's really been too long. Repo Man, I mean, it's just like, to see this, it's this Reagan era, it's this underground, it's this rebellion that's happening, it's coming up, it's bold.
Indie films, it's common. I think it's kind of crazier, and you can see it in Hollywood. That's what always so impressed me about this. When you see it at the mall, it's like, wow, cool. From the belly of the beast. Especially this is LA, you know, what we just saw. It's in LA. Mm-hmm.
Let's take maybe one last contribution from this audience. I see a hand right over here.
Okay, so as far as movies that really affected me, I'm 47, so I remember seeing this in the theater. It really affected me. But another good movie to see for the youngins would be Closet Land, another movie that came out around 1991, I want to say, and really interesting.
Closet Land.
And it holds up even during these times. It's a little independent film, and God, who was in it? It was
Alan Rickman.
Alan Rickman. And I think it was like one of Alan Rickman's best roles. Nice. So I would highly recommend Closet Land as well.
Sorry, I'm kind of blanking on the American directors. I always go to the Brits. You know, Ken Loach, Mike Leigh. We're showing a Mike Leigh film next week. Please come.
We're showing High Hopes next week, but you're not going
High
to
Hopes.
be here.
But the film will be here. I know. I'm sorry. I have to be in LA. It's the only film I'm missing this whole series. But I'm going to do an intro.
You're doing an exclusive video introduction, and
Yeah.
then John Pearson will be here to do a discussion
Okay.
afterwards.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, he'll have a lot to say. It's too bad. Maybe the next week, anyone wants to talk more about Mike Leigh, I can, because I really love him, and I know a lot about him, actually.
So why should people be here next week for, since you're not going to be here, why should people be here next week for High Hopes on Monday next week?
Because it's a really good movie. It's not like, it kicks off the Mike Leigh of the present. It's the 80s Mike Leigh, but it's the first, and then it's followed by all these great masterpieces. So, you know, you can see Secrets and Lies and Naked and, you know, all his great films, you know, Topsy Turvy and Happy Go Lucky and Vera Drake, and, you know, this guy's a master. But it was the first one. He had put in a couple decades of work doing various TV things. He has this unique methodology with actors that's, you know, unique to himself, and kind of produces these incredibly real moments, and you know, with actors. He's not using non-actors, but it's so real, and also really, like I said, it's a social satire too. So it's a super low budget, super I don't know, they might even shot on 16. But it's I don't know, it's the first, you know, if you have a great artist, it's sometimes good to see that early. It was his first film to play in the U.S. and kind of kicked off his big career after that. You know, it's one of the most acclaimed filmmakers in the world, rightfully so.
I think it's pretty safe to say that there aren't any other film series that are following up John Carpenter with Mike Leigh. That's probably not happening in any other film series anymore.
But like I said, there's a connection there. There's 1988, they both came out. There's, you know, even on this, I was thinking of like Wall Street. You know, Oliver Stone always had a lot to say. And, you know, it's like the evil New York twin, Gordon Gekko, greed is good. You know, there's something in the air there. So I always kind of admire Stone's little, he had a lot to say, but not more like that. It wasn't always, well, no, you know, Wall Street's a working class versus Gordon Gekko. So, but that, I don't know, Stone had that streak in it. We're showing later in the series, Born on the 4th of July. Good war movie.
It always takes a little while for the sort of ideology of the day to catch up, for like an art like film to really kind of catch up with it. So it'll be a few years, but I look forward to seeing film artists really make hay out of Trumpism and the Trump dilemma.
Yeah. You know, there's a response. It's like, well,
And it would be great if films were made about things that are really truly troubling America right now, such as the opioid abuse, suicide's up at an all high. There's so many things, and it'd be great if American cinema could reflect it.
So who's going to do it?
I know.
Who's going to do it? Are you going to do it?
Make your film.
Get out there. All right, do
Feel
it.
Make your film.
Make it.
Yeah, film's always chasing the moment, and it's always been a dance or a balance. Like, no studio had said, yeah, I'm going to greenlight a big budget film about opioid addiction and suicide. You know, it's not on there. That doesn't fill the theater up necessarily. So it's how to make a film about like this that is actually about that. You know, so that's the dance. Yeah. Talking about Bergman? Yeah, Fassbinder, you know, these European, I mean, they have funding from the state. You know, we're in a very capitalist, asses in the seat system here, for better or worse, you know. The world's envious of us with our, I guess, budgets and the size and history of cinema, but they often have it much better because, you know, Bergman's getting funded by Swedish TV, and, you know, Fassbinder made German television paid for all his movies, so they could be prolific and make these statements. So I just think you have to consider world cinema.
Nobody was
in
saying
these political areas, you know, nothing changes much.
Nobody's saying, hey, Ingmar, come in and we got some notes for you.
Yeah.
Come in, we're going to give you some notes on where we think this ought to go. We think you need to hang some lanterns around, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think that was happening with him. So it is a different world, but it's to be inspired by the freedom that those people had.
That's why, but when Americans pull it off, it's that much sweeter because it's more like they're smuggling, you know, smuggling it in, you know, Trojan horse cinema, if you will. You know, so that's a... But I like you mentioned Summer with Monica. That's such a great movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna wrap it up, and we're gonna be back. Well, you're gonna film an intro for
I'm
High
here in
Hopes.
spirit. It's a really great film.
Yeah,
It's the only one I'm missing this whole thing.
I'm sorry. Maybe we can hang on to the
Don't
print.
rub it in, man.
We can hang on to the print and run it in the afternoon sometime. So High Hopes is next week, and then after that is what, Barfly, I think? Yeah, Barfly's after that. So
There you go.
So you'll be back for
We're
Barfly.
We're back in the muck.
And then we got Ishtar and all these great movies coming out in the next month.
We're going all over the place. It's all fun. We're closing out the 80s. So thanks for being here. A lot of fun.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rick.